In this video, we're making fried pork belly bites, and we're going to be pairing it with an herby basil mayo that we're going to be making from scratch. And for those of you who may be intimidated at frying foods, I'll also mention an alternative cooking method for you. So first things first, we're going to prep our
flavor liquid.
I'm going to get 8 cloves of garlic and then give them a solid crushing before throwing them into a container. I removed the skin, but you don't have to do that. In that same container, throw in 1.5 tablespoons of black peppercorn and 4 bay leaves. You're also going to cut 1/4 of an onion and throw that in there as well. From there, you're going to grab 2.5 to 3 pounds of skin on pork belly. You can buy a whole plate or you can get big chunks here like I did. From there, you're going to grab a large pot that can fit all of your pork belly, and oh, look at that, there's a little piece of hair left on this one. I'm just going to pluck that right off. You're next going to throw in your garlic, onion, and peppercorns, followed by enough water to cover fully and a few heavy pinches of salt. Don't be shy with the salt either. It's going to be very hard to underseason this. Put a lid on it and then let it reach a rapid boil before lowering it to a simmer. I checked the internal temp as soon as I lowered it to a simmer, and as you can see, it's already cooked. If you're cooking a whole plate of pork belly, be prepared to simmer it for a longer time. Now, after straining my pork, I'm going to lay them down on a wire rack, and with a little pointy stick, I'm going to stab the skin really as much as possible. The more you stab it, the crispier and bubblier the skin will turn out afterwards, but be careful to only stab the outer skin layer and not the meat underneath it. Once you're done stabbing it, you're going to want to generously coat the skin with salt. This is really only helping to further dry out the skin, so that way we get a better crunch later on. And don't worry, it's not going to taste salty. We're going to be brushing this off later on. Once the skin is coated, I'm going to move the pork in a fridge uncovered and let it firm up overnight. This step is basically required, so don't be impatient and plan ahead. The next day, as you can see, the skin has gotten firm as well as the pork itself. If this was a pizza review, I would say this has 0 flop.
0 flop.
Now I'm going to set our pork aside and we're going to next work on our basil mayo. I'm going to grab 14 grams of basil leaves, which is about a little less than 1 oyster container, and I'm going to stack the leaves on top of each other and slice them through with my knife. I'll also run my knife through them a couple more times just to get a rough chop. Then in a high-sided container, I'm going to drop 2 whole eggs along with 2 cloves of garlic and 9 grams or 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. I'm going to give it a blending with an immersion blender, and then I'm going to pour in 1 cup of vegetable oil while the immersion blender is turned off. The oil should be sitting on top, and then I'm going to turn on my immersion blender, slowly bringing it up and emulsifying the oil into a mayo. Once it's emulsified, I'm going to squeeze in a little bit of half a lime juice and then throw in all of our chopped basil, giving it another blending until the basil is fully incorporated. From here, I'm going to squeeze in the rest of my half lime and then salt to taste. I would say this is a simple mayo, but the basil is prominent and it will pair nicely with our crispy pork. Speaking of pork, I'm going to brush off all that excess salt, and then with a knife, I'm going to cut bite-sized little chunks. And if you look at it from the side, you could really see all the layers of skin, fat, and meat. Once I've cut all my pork belly, I'm going to freeze 3/4 of it that I'm planning on making for Christmas Eve for my family. The rest I'm going to fry right now. Fill up a medium pot with vegetable oil and bring its temperature up until you reach 375 degrees. We're going to throw our pork belly bites in the oil and wait around 3 to 5 minutes. Now don't forget, the pork is already fully cooked from when we boiled it the day before, so you're only frying it to get to your desired crispiness, not to cook it. 3 to 4 minutes later, I'm going to pull out my pork bite, and as you can see, it's nice and crispy. The skin is nice and crunchy, and the fat also rendered out a little bit in that oil. I also would like to mention that pork can be kind of hard to fry. I'm not sure what it is, if it's the fat or something else, but it does tend to pop a lot and it could splatter oil. You could use a splash guard if you have one, or a strainer, but please be more careful than me because I washed my strainer and then put it back in the oil, forgetting that hot oil and water doesn't mix. But if frying with oil scares you, you can also use an air fryer. I air fried that frozen batch from earlier for my family for 22 minutes at 380 degrees, and they turned out just as good, if not maybe a little better than frying. But moving on, all of our pork bites are fried, and I'm gonna plate them up like so, and look at that. There's a cute little piece of basil on our basil mayo. How adorable. Now, as for the bacon bites, I would say they tasted really good. This to me is a perfect little appetizer you can serve up to people at a dinner party. The texture and crunch on them is quite nice, plus the basil mayo really rounds out the flavors of everything. I will say though that these pork bites might not be for everyone because there is a decent bit of fat in them. The fat is decently rendered out, but depending how much fat you get in your piece, you might not enjoy it as much. But I personally love the fat, even though it can be chewy, but you know, fat means flavor if you guys didn't realize. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below and have a wonderful rest of your day.